book 3, student at Carthage, and he's in love. And so he has a girlfriend. Now, again, here's another insight into Augustine and why his story is so helpful and interesting for Christians, is that he's not a monk. He's not at a monastery. He's a real guy who's out doing all these things and then thinking about it and trying to come to understand it. And as he grows up, he will do exactly that. Book 4 is Carthage. And the reason this is interesting and important is he becomes a Manichaean. And a Manichaean was a member of a religion that came out of Iran and was led by a man named Mani, M-A-N-I, and a preacher and an inspired prophet. And Manichaeism became one of the major successful religions of the Mediterranean in the 200s and 300s, and he becomes a Manichaean. So he gives you an insight into that. He gives you an insight into what this young person in the 300s believes. It's 373. About what it was about Manichaeism that he liked. Well, what did he like? Well, you see, Manichaeism is dualism, extreme dualism, where everything is light and dark, good and bad. And in Manichaeism, and it resurfaces all through history, another great one will be in the period of courtly love. In Manichaeism, you believe that the earth is dirty and bad, and the heavens and the gods are all good. And we're fallen, and this is all. So everything about this earth is bad and dirty. And so that includes sex. That includes everything. And our goal is to get out of this and get away from it. So, of course, it has a little bit of a resonance to Hindu and to escaping the cycles of life, where you get pure and pure, and then eventually you escape the dirty world we lived on. So Augustine's flirtation and actually membership in the Manichaean shows you his journey, you see, from being a Roman pagan, to then this sort of unfocused young guy, to then a Manichaean who believes, yes, I believe all this stuff, this is right. North Africa, that would have been true through Egypt, etc. And it's the opposite of Christianity in every single way. So it's just interesting that if you read him and you read book 4, you get a good insight into what the attraction was of what Manichaeism. Then he gets a girlfriend, and as I tell you in a little note there, we don't have her name. She's very, very important because he's with her, very considerable period of time, and has a child with her. So, his youthful days with his girlfriend and then his little child is a very important part of his life. And we don't have her name, so Gary Wills, and he has a wonderful book on Augustine, little book. He names her Una, because he doesn't have her name, so it's a good name because she's number one, because she was number one. So he just calls her Una. Don't you like that? I love it because I love talking about Una, because then I think I know who she is, and so that's the girlfriend. And you get to read about Augustine reading Aristotle. You see, so you people who have your own copy of the categories, right, in your precious Making the Western Mind Library, don't you have it sitting right next to all the most precious books, Aristotle's categories, right? Well, there's his commentary on the categories. And the Manichaeans, let's see, Crisis over Manichaeism in book 5. And then he goes to Milan. So that's important there. 383, he goes to Rome. He's pursuing a career. He's going to be pursuing what essentially would be graduate study, higher study. And so he goes to Milan, and goes to Rome first and then goes to Milan. He goes to Rome and realizes Rome isn't the place to be, that there's nothing going on there. It's zero, no action, no heat, not hot. It's not hot like, San Francisco's hot, right? Right? So you want to be in San Francisco, right, where it's hot. San Jose's not hot, San Francisco's hot, right? Isn't that true? Yeah, right? These guys know, yeah. They know what's hot. And so he goes to Milan because Milan is hot. And in Milan, he meets the bishop of Milan named Ambrose. Ambrose is this brilliant leader of the Christian community in Milan. He's the bishop of Milan. And there Augustine meets Ambrose, and Ambrose teaches him about Christianity. And finally, in, I think, I don't know the date, but it's in your notes, he is converted, book 8, the conversion. That is, let me move it to book 8, there. Book 8, if you didn't read all the book, go read book 8. It's a fabulous section of him in Milan, in a Milanese city villa, palazzo, that would look just like a lot of them do. And he's out in the garden, because there are always gardens inside these city buildings. He was out in the garden, and he's reading the letters of Paul. Isn't that interesting? That there he is in Milan, and it's the 387, and he's reading the letters of Paul. And he hears a voice in the garden, which says, "Pick up and read." He's in the garden, and he just hears this voice. He picks up the book, and because, of course, a copy of the New Testament is laying there. He picks up the book. He hears this voice over the wall. He describes it all, book 8, and it says, "Pick up," and he picks it up, and it's Romans 13 and 14. He picks it up, and that's what he reads. And it says, this is Paul's letter to the Romans, "Not in riots and drunken parties, not in eroticism and indecencies, not in strife and rivalry, but put on the Lord Jesus Christ and make no provision for the flesh in its lusts." In other words, you've been wrong, you've been going wrong, get right, and so he does. So he converts, 387, one of the great dates in the history of Christianity, 387, because he goes to the Cathedral of Milan, and listen to me, listen to this. You can go down in the bottom of the medieval Cathedral of Milan, great big huge cathedral built in the 1300s. You can go down the stairs into the old cathedral, which was lower, and they will show you the baptismal pool in the stone that they had built for baptisms, and they will show you exactly where Ambrose baptized Augustine. How about that? 387, Milan. It's still there. You can go there. How about that for continuity? 387, you go right there and see the place where these two giants met and Ambrose baptized Augustine into Christianity. 387, Milan. A great thing when you think about it. Someday when you have time, read book 10 on memory and book 11 on time. They are so brilliant that if nothing else, if we only had that chapter on his passage on time, we would understand how great he was. We have lots more. Sit down someday and read Augustine's Confessions, book 11 on time, because nobody since then has written a more brilliant understanding of the complexity of time to us, to human beings, than he did in that book. And that was in, 390. So it's, 1,600, 1,700 years old. And it's still the best. So that's book 11 on time. Finally, in our last few minutes, a little Latin for you. Quid Athenae Hieroselymus? This phrase is a question. And it was a question asked by Tertullian, an important Christian writer in the 200s. Quid Athenae Hieroselymus? Meaning, what does Athens have to do with Jerusalem? Yeah, what does Athens have to do with Jerusalem? Now, we are going to finish with that question here tonight because this was the most important question that this generation of thinkers, Ambrose, Augustine, Jerome, and others, we're going to have to face. We already noticed in the Confessions that Augustine was having trouble learning Greek, that he didn't really like Homer. that he also has trouble with Aristotle and the categories. He knows that he's reading it, but he has questions. So, in other words, we have a generation now at this date of 400 that's starting to be detached from Plato and Aristotle 700 years before, and even more detached from Homer 1400 years before. So what we are seeing now in this journey we've been on for 11 weeks is a new generation, circa 400, that has in front of it the question mark, what does this Greek-Roman heritage have to do with us? And the question, Tertullian's question, Tertullian, Tertullian, his question, quid Athenae Hieroselymus, had the following answer: nothing. That was his answer, nothing. Now, if that had been the final decision of the 4th century writers of Christianity and of Rome, then all of Western civilization would be different. Everything else about Western civilization would be different if Tertullian's answer had been accepted by everybody else. But it wasn't. And it is Ambrose, Augustine, and Jerome, more than anybody else, who together, all three of them, all agree that the answer is the other answer, a lot. And that it is up to them to begin to fashion some understanding of how these Christian people could bring into their understanding of the universe the ideas of the Greeks and the Romans and the Jews. How could it all come together? That was what they now began to try to do. Ambrose, Augustine, and Jerome, at about the year 400, all of them now worked to write down some explanation as to how the Greek world and the Roman world and the Jewish world and the Christian world could all come together. And that therefore we should hold on to the Greek and the Roman heritage and the Jewish heritage, we now inform. We should hold on to it. We should study it. We should know it. We should teach it. We should learn Cicero. He says here in his book, I love Cicero. We should learn Cicero. We should read Homer. We should read these other books. They're important. We should read them. And so for the next 100 years or so, 400 to 500, Western civilization will be engaged in this huge dialogue debate. How do we explain the connection? But we're sure there is one. Well, of course, the answer they came up with was the same God that made the same universe that Plato and Aristotle explain is the same God who made Abraham and Moses and made the covenant with Abraham and made Israel and Jerusalem, and is the same God that appeared in the Christian revelation. That's how they explained it. And of course they were right. That was exactly right. That was the way to see it. That the order of the universe that Plato described philosophically was the same order that John is describing in the opening paragraph of the Gospel according to John. In the beginning was the Word, order. In the beginning was the word order, and it was Jesus. Jesus was there with God. God, Jesus, Holy Spirit were there from the beginning. And they are the same order, that is the same principle of order, that Plato and Aristotle explained. So with the generation of Augustine and Ambrose and Jerome, Western civilization created a synthesis for the first time ever. Nobody had ever done this before. Because first of all, nobody could do it before, because until the Edict of Milan 313, you couldn't even do this publicly. So that's the key step there, 313. But once that's happened, once Constantine has made Christianity legal, then the next generation, Ambrose, Augustine, and Jerome, they have to embark on this explanation of how the Greek and the Roman world could come together with the Jewish and the Christian, and that's what they did. So, for example, in the 500s, as Greek was disappearing, what was the logical thing to do? Go get the works of Plato and Aristotle and translate them into Latin. Exactly. So that's what they did. So they were saying, oh, we know that's important. Oh, we know the Greek things are important. Oh, we must keep them. And right now we don't speak Greek anymore very well, so we better put this in Latin. And so they did. And so anything that got translated into Latin in 500 survived straight through from 500 all the way up to the present. Those things that didn't would have to go a longer route. But back to the importance of these people, because they were bringing together antithetical ideas. They were bringing together two polarities that were not actually naturally conducive to work together. But they were sure it should be brought together, so they worked all during the next centuries on trying to explain again and again and again how a scientific, logical explanation of things that we see in those Greeks could come together with a spiritual and historical explanation that were coming from the Jews, and how the two actually could come together and explain everything better than only one or only the other. They were right, but what they gave Western civilization was this unique tension, this unique friction and tension where you have these two different polarities pulling against and back and out and away from each other, and then coming back again and again and again through all of Western history. You could look at 10 events if we had time tonight. We could just go through one after another, after another, after another. Reformation is a good example, where a certain part of the partnership pulls away and then will have to be brought back together, brought back together, brought back together. It will happen again and again and again. The spiritual and the logical, the scientific and the religious, again and again. Western civilization will bring it back, and we'll keep working at doing it, and we'll keep succeeding at it, and we'll keep building again and again.